No, there. I haven't gotten that far, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, if there's anything we can do, let me know.
Thank you. No, we'll get there. I'm just slow.
Okay. Just make sure you don't end up with your head stuck that way.
Yeah, it kind of is. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but I've got a little tilt. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's the right direction or not, but.
Okay, we should be streaming live.
Thank you. Good morning, Grace.
Morning.
Okie dokie. Got 8:30 on my device here, and we are streaming live. So I'd like to call the meeting of the Cook County Board of Commissioners to order on Tuesday, January 12th at 8:30. Please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
I would like to pull two things off the consent agenda. Do you want me to do that now?
Well, normally we would do it before approving the consent agenda, but that's fine to do that now. Which two items would you like to?
The two new hires, or the two items about hires.
Okay.
I'd like to move to the regular agenda.
Okay. So on the consent agenda, that would be item C and then item
D.
I'm sorry?
Item C and item D.
D. Oh, okay. The temp agreement.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other adjustments to the agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
We have Commissioner Sullivan with a motion. Is there support?
Starley, support.
Commissioner Starley, support. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills? Aye as well. We've got our agenda. I should probably read the language about having a virtual meeting too, just so we're crossing all our T's here. It has been we have number one. It has been determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related peacetime emergency declaration made by Governor Walz in accordance with Minnesota Statutes Chapter 12. Number two, we have ensured that all members of the body participating in the meeting, wherever their physical location, can hear one another and can hear all discussion and testimony offered at today's meeting. Number three, we have also ensured that members of the public present at the regular meeting location of the body can hear all discussion and testimony and all votes of the members of the body. We have urged the public not to attend this meeting in person because of the COVID-19 pandemic and have ensured that members of the public can view and monitor the meeting remotely in real time by broadcasting the meeting on the Cook County website. Number four, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have determined that it may be unfeasible for County Auditor Brady Powers, County Attorney Molly Hicken, County Administrator James Yorkey, and members of the Board of Commissioners to be physically present at the County Boardroom at the Cook County Courthouse. Number five, all votes will be conducted by roll call, so each member's vote on each issue will be identified and recorded. All right, moving on. Public comment period. Do we have anyone in the boardroom wishing to make public comment?
No, we do not.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Have you received any public comment electronically or written, Administrator Yorkie?
I have not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move on to number 3, the consent agenda. We have 2 items pulled. Would anyone like to pull anything else from the consent agenda? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you,
Approve the
Commissioner
consent
Hawkins. Yep. Do we have support?
Chairman Mills, it's okay to pull them. Where do you want to put them? For discussion.
Well, I guess we'd probably put them into the, well, let's put it, should we say, move assessor down and put it after the Emergency Operations Command update?
Between 4 and 5?
Yes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. And we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Storley,
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We've approved the consent agenda. Moving on to item 4 is the Emergency Operations Command update. And both Mike Keyport and Grace Grenager are on here. Who would like to go first?
Either way is fine with me. Mike, I see you're unmuted. Do you want to start us off or do you want me to get us started?
Go ahead, Grace, and I'll
Okay.
follow up.
Sounds good. So it's been a couple weeks now since I gave an update to the board. My last update was on December 22nd. And since that time, our case count has gone from 102 to 112. And our positivity rate, which is the rate of all tests for county residents during that time that turned out positive, has fallen from 6.3% to 1.3%. So that is well under that 5% mark. That's kind of a benchmark for when we start to get concerned. So it's moving in the right direction. The lower positivity rate is welcome. And it really means that the amount of testing happening in the community is fairly well matched to the amount of the COVID-19 virus that's spreading in the community. And this most recent period that MDH reported on, our 14-day case rate per 10,000 people is at 9.41. And really anything over 10 is significant and cause for concern. So we're also really moving in the right direction. I think both of those data points combined show that we're in a good place right now with the pandemic. So I'm very grateful for the community and making some difficult choices and sacrifices and helping us stay in a place where we have the control. We have fairly good control over the spread of COVID-19 right now. And that's really a testament to the community. So updates from what's happened in the public health response and in the EOC these past weeks. The day after my last update, so on December 23rd, we received notice that we are going to be receiving a $35,000 grant from the National Association of City and County Health Officials to support our mass vaccination and case investigation contact tracing efforts within the county's public health department. So the award itself is going to be split and also will be supporting efforts through our partner agencies at Grand Portage Health Services and Sawtooth Mountain Clinic. And I'm very excited about this award. We're one of 30 counties throughout the country to receive it. And it's a grant program that's specifically for rural frontier health departments. So that is based on population and the distance to a population center or a city that would qualify a county as being rural frontier. So part of the program allows us to be in a learning community with other counties similar to ours all across the country. So I think that'll be a really great opportunity for us to learn about how other counties throughout the country are responding to the pandemic, specifically in terms of mass vaccination efforts and case investigation, contact tracing. The EOC put out a media release 2 weeks ago now it was a joint release with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic on vaccine planning. And if you visit the county hub site, it's now front and center. So it's the first thing you see when you go onto the hub site. So the media release talks about our planning efforts in general, but along with that release, Allison, working with the communications for the risk, has really made that very visible and easy for community members to find. So both the clinic, the North Shore Health, and public health, we've all been trying to drive traffic to the hub site when people have questions about vaccination and when different priority groups fall and what we know and what we don't know. So that's been a really good change, because I think it'll help people know where they can go when they have questions. And we're always open to taking those questions within public health too. We continue to get a fair number of questions coming in from community members and businesses wondering when they're going to be eligible for vaccination. So we share what we know and also what we don't know, and now we have a place to continue to post updates as things evolve. 2 weeks ago now, we received our first doses of vaccine, of the Moderna vaccine. Our allocation was 40 doses. And last week, we received 100 doses. These are they're allocated towards phase 1A groups. So that includes EMS, other first responders, and healthcare workers in the community. It's likely that we may not receive more vaccine in the next week or two, because the state is doing a big push right now to vaccinate all residents of assisted living throughout the state. And so since we don't have an assisted living facility, we may not actually receive more vaccine until that push, the state works through that push. So the way that the vaccination kind of distribution works in a nutshell is the federal government allocates a certain number of doses to the state of Minnesota, and then the state of Minnesota works with they work with a number of entities to try to determine the allocation for healthcare systems, for tribes that are opting to receive vaccine through the state rather than IHS, with some commercial pharmacies that are really helping with the assisted living vaccination. And so we know on a week by week basis if we've been invited to we fill out something called a ready to receive survey. And if they're able to allocate doses to us, they invite us to fill out this survey and tell us how much we will get. And if we're not in a given week, then we don't fill out the survey. And basically last week they said some of the counties might have to wait until they get through the assisted living facilities. The state has also been holding back second doses to make sure that there's enough. So we don't have to do that locally. We know that 28 days from our first shipment, we'll be getting our second shipment, so that people who start their vaccination will be able to end their vaccination, and we'll have enough supply on hand for that. A big win and a big change is now we're able to direct order from the state, from MDH, and have shipments go to Sawtooth Mountain Clinic. So that first round of 40 doses, we split with Lake County, and we wound up sending Jim Wienanen, who's helping with emergency management, down to Lake County Public Health and Human Services to pick that up. And it's just, this vaccine is very delicate to handle, not to mention there's extra time and logistics involved with sending someone down to Lake County every time we need to pick up more vaccine. So it's really fantastic that we're able to now receive those shipments locally. The Sawtooth Mountain Clinic and Public Health worked together on a mini vaccination events last Wednesday, the 6th. It was in the curling rink here at the community center. We used all those 40 doses that we had received, and it went very well. We had a debrief afterwards, and it really was a great learning experience to help us plan how we're going to run future vaccination events, how we're going to scale this up as more vaccine becomes available. We're in the early stages of planning our next event. It'll likely be here at the curling rink in the community center. Again, it's a good open space. And for the next several weeks, maybe even month or two here, what we're going to be doing is running these events called closed points of dispensing. And basically that means they're not vaccination clinics that are open to the public. They're really closed to a specific group that the state has said that we're able to vaccinate right now. So a lot of what we're doing right now is kind of pre-planning and doing outreach with employers and other entities like to try to be ready for when we can move forward. So we know, for example, how many people are interested in the vaccine who work at groups that are going to be in phase 1B. And once we know, we'll be much better able to plan how to run this next phase of vaccine distribution. We're waiting for some more instructions from the Minnesota Department of Health on moving to phase 1B. It's likely that they're going to kind of tier and subdivide phase 1B. It's a larger group than phase 1A. Phase 1B is going to be schools, daycares, additional first responders that haven't already been vaccinated, grocery stores, mass transit, manufacturing, and post office, and also people over the age of 75. So I'm not sure how they're going to want us to prioritize that phase, but we're trying to do as much work as we can now so that we're ready to move quickly when we can. Also, 2 weeks ago, Dr. Farshman, who is the medical director for the COVID response at Sawtooth Mountain Clinic, he and I co-presented on the COVID-19 vaccine to our EMS across the county. We did record that, and it's now posted on the county's YouTube channel. So I'll send a link to everyone on how to access that. We did do some Q&As afterwards for the EMS, and that portion is kind of cut out of the recording, but the recording itself is really good basic information about what we know and don't know about vaccination in general and about the vaccines themselves. So that's a fantastic resource that I hope people take a look at if they're curious or have questions. Also, MDH has started posting county level vaccination data online, along with the case count and all of their other data. They update it every day at 11, and I will include the link to that. We've also been updating the hub site to include how many people have received at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. And as of yesterday, we were at 288 people in Cook County. So the difference between that, 40 that we'd received and the 288, that's because some of our partner agencies at Sawtooth Mountain Clinic, North Shore Health, and Grand Portage Health Services have also been able to receive additional doses. So that first push to vaccinate healthcare workers that through North Shore Health, and then Grand Portage also began their vaccination efforts on January 6th, so last Wednesday. So they have the ability to kind of decide their own priority system within Grand Portage, and they've begun vaccinating Health and Human Services, EMS, fire, school personnel, and people over the age of 55 with underlying health conditions. So that 288 is really combined between all the vaccinating entities in the county and in Grand Portage. And that is my update. Happy to take questions. Feels like it's been a while, and now we have 2 new commissioners as well. So it's really nice to see both of your faces here, and I'm happy to clarify or add detail to anything that might be unclear or anything you have questions on.
Just want to thank you, Grace, for the great work you're doing. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. We've got it too, so.
Yeah,
Not just-
Grace, I do want to point out that it certainly is hugely on the community and how we've responded as a community, but you've also done really good work as well as the public health educator, as well as the contact tracers. So it really is a team effort, and so I think you need to take some of that credit too. But thank you, community, for being with the team and doing all we can to combat this. So I'm sorry, Commissioner Storley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Mills. Yes, Grace, appreciate everything you've been doing. I have a situation here in the West End that I've received calls from senior citizens. They don't have a computer. So the best advice that I'm giving them is to tune into WTIP, because regularly between you and Dr. Farchman, you do great updates. Do you have any suggestions about any other sources?
Yeah, WTIP is a great source. I think what we've talked about within the EOC is once we're able to move into new groups, that we'll be doing pretty robust media outreach. So it's not just going to be online. It's helpful to have the hub be a source of information, but we know that not everyone has internet access or feels comfortable using the computer. So I think once we are able to move into broader groups, for example, that over 75 group, we're going to have to be really thoughtful about how we make sure everyone knows. So I think it's going to be a combination of posting on the hub site, talking on the radio, but also doing media releases. And I mean, we've even talked about, like, can we do proactive phone calls from to people we know fall into that group? It's kind of a lot to work out. I mean, there's a lot of logistics to these vaccination events, especially with the over 75 group. We've also been talking about, what about if people can't physically get to a vaccination site? Would it be possible to do things, for example, on site at some of the multi-use or multi-unit housing complexes that house large numbers of elders? Would it be possible to have people helping with transportation assistance? The tricky thing about this vaccine is it doesn't like to travel. It's pretty specific. There's a 6-degree temperature range, and we're not supposed to jostle it around or anything like that. And once we puncture a vial, we have to use all the vaccine within 6 hours. So we're trying to kind of figure out, both from the logistics side of things, how can we make this accessible, but also from the communications end of things, how are we going to make sure people know? And I think really the main message is we're going to do our best to try to spread the message widely and do everything we can to make sure everyone's aware when they're able to get the vaccine. We're very committed to making it available to everyone. It's just going to be a process of kind of waiting to see when we're able to move further into the process. So we're kind of we're on standby from the state, really. As soon as we know that we have more vaccine on hand, then we can move into some of these other priority groups. We just need to be ready and ready to communicate as well. So I think combination of media releases that could be going out in the newspaper, for example, and on the radio. I've been doing a PSA, I think, so it repeats more often than our interviews do, would be a good idea. But I have to be,
if I can
take more ideas on that as well. We do continue to get calls from people who want to just be put on a list, but we don't have a list going. We don't need you don't need to get on a list at all for being eligible for the vaccine. We'll make sure that we reach out when we're able to accommodate more people.
Well, if I can be of help there too, I have a small list of seniors who are, been asking me because they figure, oh, what's going on. And I'm saying, well, I only know what's going on because of your information.
Changing situation. It's really kind of day by day. Like,
I know.
Last week we did EMS, and then this week they said, oh, we can kind of expand the first responder definitions. We reached back out to the fire halls, and we're just kind of, doing the best we can to try to get people in as fast as we can. Right. Anyone who's eligible and wants to receive the vaccine. So.
Well, the good news this morning is that supposedly everything's going to be released. Everything that's been stockpiled and so forth is coming out. So that might help
Yeah, I'm not clear how that's gonna affect the state. I'm hoping I hear more this afternoon. We have a Tuesday
Right.
standing meeting with the state health department, and I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear more about that.
Right. Thanks, Grace.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any comments, or Commissioner Hawkins?
Yes, thanks, Grace. I'm curious about the vaccine part of it. And you said you need to fill out a ready to receive survey every week to get doses? Do all 3 entities or 4 entities in Cook County have to do that to get the vaccine every week?
Well, not all of us will be eligible every week. So it's let's see. So Grand Portage Health Services is also receiving vaccine through the Minnesota Department of Health. And I believe that they also hear on a week-by-week basis what the next week's allotment. It might be a slightly different survey, but I know that they also have that kind of regular communication with the state about doses available to them. North Shore Health they received their vaccine through something called the Northeast Healthcare Coalition that includes all healthcare facilities, public health, and emergency management, first responders. So that they received doses through the coalition, and the coalition was responsible for distributing to healthcare partners. So the Sawtooth, and so they were largely just responsible for the care center, North Shore Health, and Sawtooth Mountain Clinic employees, because there's some crossover in employees with Sawtooth and North Shore Health. And then the county public health system is in some ways unique because we have some integration with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic in a number of kind of programs. And so we wound up having to talk to the state specifically about, not having the vaccine come to the county, but having it come to the clinic. And so the clinic and public health are really working together. So I'm the one who the survey comes to, but there's 2 surveys, and we're still kind of trying to figure out, like, we want to make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks. Like, they're asking me how many people fall into a specific tier of a specific category. And then I think, according to what I put in that survey that I fill out together with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic, they have a separate survey that's that readiness to receive survey. And they interface because the numbers in one survey affect the allotment in the other survey. And the readiness to receive survey is, in a lot of ways, because this vaccine is so specific in its handling, they want to make sure that when the state sends out the vaccine, that somebody says, yes, we are ready, we will receive the vaccine and handle it correctly so that it goes into a freezer or a cooler at the correct temperatures and we don't waste any vaccine. So that's kind of like you check the box, like, yes, someone will be here on this day at this time to receive this vaccine. And so that's what the readiness to receive survey is. There's like 2 parts to it, the part that I'm filling out and the part that the clinic's filling out. And we wind up doing it together just to make sure that we're answering all of these surveys correctly.
So when you said you received 40 doses, that's the county's portion, but not the clinics or the hospitals?
So they're the same. So the clinic and the county together are working as community vaccinators. So now that we kind of move out of this, like the very first phase 1A tier 1, which was care center and healthcare employees employed through North Shore Health and Sawtooth Mountain Clinic, this next phase and moving forward is largely not through North Shore Health, but through public health in partnership with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic. So in a lot of ways, we're sort of acting as one entity. It's just a partnership entity that's between the clinic itself and public health, if that makes sense. So yeah, that 40 doses was for the EMS and other healthcare workers. And then this next 100 doses is to complete that category.
And so I'm wondering, how many did you ask for and only got 40 or only got 100? Or was that the last part?
40, that was the very first one that we got. So with that first 40, it was, so the other thing about the vaccine is it ships in lots of 100. So if you're, so that's another reason that we were sharing with Lake County, is because it was the 60-40 split. But that number was based on outreach with all of the fire halls to see how many people were EMSRB certified throughout the county who hadn't been vaccinated through North Shore Health. So that's where that 40 came from. That first survey was very specific, like how many people working in the county are EMSRB certified. And then this next week, they said how many additional kind of first responders would fall into this phase 1A tier 2 category. And so that's where the 50 to 100 came from. Or that's where the 100 came from. The number that we put in was like the other first responders that would now be eligible would be between 50 and 100. And so they sent us 100 because it ships in lots of 100.
Okay. And when do you expect those vaccines to go into arms?
Next Monday is when we're planning our next event. We're still hammering out the details, but it's very likely going to be next Monday at the community center in the curling rink.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other, Commissioner Sullivan, do you have any further comments or questions? Okay. All right, thank you, Grace. Mike Eeport, would you like to give your update, please?
Sure. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, community members. Just a few things from the emergency management side. Of course, our Emergency Operations Center remains operational, both virtually and physically. Jim Wienerman manages the EOC at the community center on a part-time basis. I continue to meet with the state of Minnesota and our 11 county, 5-tribe region. As you might guess, in the region, it's pretty much everything vaccine. Everybody's just really pushing to get the vaccine out as fast as they can get it. Carleton County did a very large vaccination event that was actually made it to Time Magazine, believe it or not, from our small region here. The state has pushed out some PPE for law enforcement. I received it yesterday. It's about 1,000 3M KN95 masks. We didn't ask for it, they just sent it, so it's here. The state is also providing PPE. It's cloth masks and face shields for all the schools around the state. That'll be here this week. Jim and I and the EOC helped the first distribution of this type of PPE, and we'll assist the schools this week again to make sure they get what they need. As Grace mentioned, here locally, Jim and I are helping round up first responders and firefighters for the next vaccination event. Another thing locally here, not locally, it's region-wide. April sent it out to the county employees. It's called the Blue Light Project. It's a kind of a, I would call it kind of a fun event. It's basically asking folks the last week in January to replace their outdoor light with a blue light bulb, recognizing frontline workers throughout our county and the region. Just showing some support. So that's kind of uplifting. The John Bear Grease Sled Dog Marathon is scheduled to begin on the 31st, leaving Duluth. They put together a real robust COVID-19 plan. So they'll be moving forward with the minus fans at the start and the checkpoints. That being said, you know, there is public areas where folks can go still see dogs. I would just advise our folks here in Cook County to be kind and be safe. You know, if that's what folks choose to do on public properties that we don't have control over. At the checkpoints in the start, there will be somebody monitoring and only let people into the point and the start that need to be there. So that's coming at the end of the month. I hope it goes well, and that's my update for you folks today.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to point out too, just your efforts and Jim Wienenen's efforts in keeping our community safe here, and you know, getting our numbers back down, and just all the long hours you've been putting in. I just really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the work you do with coordinating in the region and with the state. It's one big team there. So thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions or comments?
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Looks as if we can move on to the items we pulled from the consent agenda. That would be the first one was to approve the hire of Anthony Booth as the PHHS social worker, substance use disorder licensing case manager. Commissioner Hawkins, did you have some questions there?
Yeah, I did reach out to Allison and Grace about these issues, but I kind of just wanted, Allison, if you would be willing to just speak about the reorganization or whatever you're doing up there for this position.
Absolutely, I'm happy to give a little more background on this position. So the request before you today, good morning, commissioners, by the way. The request before you today is to approve the hire of Anthony Booth as a substance use disorder and licensing case manager. This is a new position for the department, originally approved in our 2020 budget. For the last year, this position has been filled on a temporary basis by one of our staff within the department, Sarah Hadley, in a temporary out of class appointment. So Sarah had been working quite a bit in her role as a case aide, providing support to individuals in our community and accessing outpatient treatment services. So this was really an expansion of that role. Based on needs that we're seeing locally, and as well as a new opportunity at the state and federal level to draw down revenue for services provided. So we had proposed this position in 2020, initially proposing that it would be paired with daytime crisis response as another area where our department is currently providing services, but we aren't formally certified through the state to bring in revenue. So a planned full expansion of services that allows us to bring in additional revenue for work that in many cases we're already doing. So for the last year, as I said, Sarah has been providing support. Prior to Sarah, James Zimmer in his role as adult mental health case manager and chemical dependency case manager was providing these services locally. So the proposal is to shift some duties around within the Children and Family Services unit of PHHS. We will be shifting the licensing role to this new position. Currently, Heidi Akins is our intake social worker and licenser. And by shifting licensing off of Heidi's plate, that will allow her to really take a lead role in providing the daytime crisis response services locally. This has been a gap since HDC closed their offices in 2018 through intake in social services. Our staff are often called to respond during a daytime crisis, helping people access services through the emergency room, coordinating with hospital staff, with law enforcement, Grand Portage Human Services, clinic staff. But it isn't an area where we have really been formally providing that services. We've just been filling in a gap. So we were able to secure some regional grant dollars, which will allow us to work with the Human Development Center to provide clinical supervision, which is a key component of providing daytime crisis response. They will also provide us with some technical assistance, which will allow us as a department to be formally certified to provide this service, and again, draw down revenue from the state and from health plans by providing services to Cook County.
So when you say draw down revenue, I'm sorry, I'm trying to learn all this really quick. But what is the percentage of cost versus revenue we receive? Can you tell me that?
Are you looking for the department as a whole or for specific services?
Well, okay, like this position, what's the caseload going to be for this person? And you're telling me this is going to allow us to draw down revenue. So is it because I am still confused? I'm really sorry that I'm still confused.
Right, it's very confusing. It is, so it would be dependent on the individual that we're working with and their insurance coverage. So by providing treatment coordination services specifically, we would bill that person's health plan. So that would be dependent on a number of factors: what type of insurance they have, do they cover this type of service? Our fiscal staff within PHHS work very, very hard to ensure that for any services we're providing as a department, that we're able to access revenue for services provided. It isn't always possible. There are many cases where we are mandated to provide a service regardless of an individual's insurance coverage or status or income. But when there is a revenue source, that's something that we've been working on for the last several years in particular to really improve our billing and revenue capture processes as a department, and seeking out grants and becoming certified to more formally provide services like treatment coordination and daytime crisis response, which would allow us to bring in revenue for the services provided. And again, I'm not able to provide an exact number of the caseload that's dependent on many, many factors. Referrals come into our agency from various sources, and to our some of our human services programs might refer to this individual. I'm not able to provide an exact breakdown of the ratio of revenue or the number of individuals served by this position.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Allison? I just want to thank you for working on this. I know it's been long in coming, and you know, it really does work towards our mission of supporting community through quality public service. And when HDC did leave, that did shake everything up significantly, and I know you had plenty of other things going on besides. So thank you, Allison, for working on this. Well, with no further questions, is there a motion to approve the hire here?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. Is there support?
I support that move.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye. Passes unanimously. And then for the second item that we pulled, it was in regards to the temporary public health employment agreements. Allison, do you want to give a little brief summary there as well, please?
Sure, I'm happy to. So this is an amendment to contracts that were initially approved last year to bring on 4 temporary public health staff using CARES Act funds. Those positions were funded through the CARES Act and an additional public health COVID-19 response grant in 2020. At the November 17th Public Health and Human Services Board meeting, the board approved the conditional use of department fund balance to continue to support these positions into 2021 through June, knowing that our response would long outlast the availability of CARES dollars locally. At that point, we had several that were pending, waiting to hear back about whether or not our requests were successful. There are a number of things happening at the state, local, regional, and federal level with regards to funding for response. So in that era of uncertainty, asked for the approval to modify our 2021 budget to continue to support these positions in absence of other funding. We have, as Grace shared, been successful in securing grant funds, which will considerably offset the amount that we will need to use from our fund balance in 2021. That NACCHO grant Grace shared will be $21,000. So essentially half of what we had requested to use from fund balance. A couple of other smaller grants that we applied for are really targeted at supporting the perinatal peer support project that one of the temporary public health staff has taken a lead on. So that will offset some of the personnel costs as well as programming costs for that distinct program. But the amounts in the contract amendment do include the CARES funding from 2019. So for the purpose of calculating the do not exceed amounts for 2021, I looked at the total amount that we were approved to use of fund balance and split that between each of the now 3 temporary public health staff, as Jody Turbo Roberts was hired to fill the full-time vacancy in public health after Kristen DeRuta Wharton resigned. So split those 50 hours between those 3 staff based on the hours that they're currently working to support our response efforts. And as Grace said, while our numbers in case investigation, contact tracing, that volume of work has gone down, each of these staff are really providing critical support as we plan for the logistics, communication, and distribution of vaccine in the community. Happy to take any other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. And yeah, I'm really happy to hear, I mean, on a number of levels, of course, that our numbers are going down, but I just know how overwhelming it can be for the contact tracers and how hard that work is. Just the challenges it presents on a number of different levels there too. So that's really great. It's unfortunate we just have the 3, but I'm very, very grateful for the 3. So does anyone else have any questions or comments? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yes, I would want to ask more about the perinatal position and how many families are taking part in this or getting services.
Grace, would you that? Yeah, sure. So the Perinatal Peer Support Project right now is 2 weekly Zoom sessions that are facilitated by one of our health educators, Sadie Sigford. And the attendance can fluctuate between 2 and 6 families at any given time. So in any given session, I would say we average probably maybe around 4 participants in any given session, but it varies. It's not something that, it's a drop-in group, so you don't have to sign up to attend for a certain number of sessions. So it does vary week to week, but I would say on average, we have about 4 participants joining the groups in any given session. So that would be a total of 8 in a week.
So 8 in a week. So they're different participants or those are the same?
Nope, so they would be different because we have a Wednesday evening and then we have a Saturday morning session. So
Okay.
2 sessions total in a week. It would be, I would say on average, 8 different participants. So
And-
those participants, I mean, they can be some variation week to week, but that's a good estimate for how many people are participating in a week.
And Allison, you said there was a grant received for this position? Is that correct? And what was the amount of that grant?
So we received 2 grants specific to the Growing Families Program, which is the perinatal peer support program, one from the North Shore Collaborative. That grant amount was $9,615. And we also received a grant from the North Shore Healthcare Foundation in the amount of $7,000.
I totally agree. You guys are doing good work. We do have a budget issue we will be discussing later. So my concern is 8 participants, that much money. You've got grants. Yeah, North Shore Health. I'm just concerned we have to look at our numbers, and I'm the one that's going to do it. I feel better now knowing the numbers of the grant amount and the Sadie's not to exceed dollar amount. And if you can guarantee me we're not going to go over that, I guess I'm okay with this.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding the temporary employment contracts? Otherwise, I'd ask for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the amended temporary public health employment contracts.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Is there support?
Sterling support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Starley,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. Unanimous approval. Thank you both for providing additional information here, and just really appreciate the work you're doing, both the contact tracing and just the family support. Anything we can do to keep our community safe and strong during this time, I think is really should be our focus. So thank you both. Let's see here. Moving on to the assessor, we have property tax abatement. Assessor Thompson, would you like to give a brief description for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, commissioners. This is basically just there's 2 records on this property. Anytime there's a homestead that has a second living structure, there's a split classification. In this case, it looks like back in 2018 assessment, we had made an error in record 1 and 2 were just reversed. So this would be applying the homestead to a larger portion of the land value. It results in about a $98 difference for it's 2019 and 2020. This one is for 2019. The 2020 was a current year homestead abatement, which we can process administratively. So this is just going back for that 2019 tax.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or concerns for Assessor Thompson? If not, I would look for a motion to approve this.
I'll make the motion to approve this abatement.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins, for the motion. Do we have support?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Storley,
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye for unanimous approval. Thank you, Assessor Thompson.
Thank you.
moving on our agenda down to the highway. We've got Engineer Haas here with us, and looks like we're just adding potentially adding a member to the Highway Advisory Committee.
Yeah, we have an opening in one of our districts. I think it was 4, if I remember correct. And so Mr. Hague put in his application. I think he'd be a great addition to the committee. Somebody that's been in the community for obviously a long time. It'll be great to leverage his expertise in the future. So.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Engineer Haas? If not, I'd look for a motion for approval.
Motion to approve Chris Hague for the Highway Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. Unanimous approval. Thank you, Engineer Haas.
Thank you, everybody.
And moving down to Land Services, we have Director Nelson in the meeting here, and this is potentially adding a member to the Planning Commission. Do you want to give a little description there, Mr. Nelson? Calling all Tims. Well, we can also skip this item for the time being and interrupt though, Tim, if you're having technical difficulties or what have you, can have a little patience there. But otherwise, we're going down to Auditor Powers with first item being the extension of loan payment deferral. Would you like to give a brief description there, Mr. Powers?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good. So the board has approved deferrals for our revolving loan fund payers twice this year. Initially back in March for 6 months, and then in September, the board extended it for 3 months to the end of December. Both times that was at the recommendations of the committee who've been in contact with the loan payers and know the distress the local businesses are in due to COVID. The committee met again in December to look at this, and again is recommending this time 6-month extension to take it out to June 30th, 2021, and hopefully we won't have to revisit this again at this time. And part of the reasoning is that many of these loans at this time were supported by the some of this federal funding. Some got grants, some got loans, and the loans are due now in January, so they're starting to make payments on those loans. And there may be additional funding, but that's unsure of how much and who's getting what. And we've continued to survey our loans when we send out these letters and asking them to tell us what their condition is. Some are doing okay. Some really need this deferral. They won't be making their payments in any case. So, or giving up other things they shouldn't in order to make the payment. The committee this time, because of the varied conditions, some businesses did quite well during the summer and fall, and some not so well. So we're asking each one of them to get this deferral, that they make a statement to us asking for it, and that they tell us, what difficulty, hardship they're in order to receive the deferral. So that's the basic basis of it. I just ask if you have any questions.
Thank you, Auditor Powers. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments there? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I'm wondering, the last time we did this deferral, what was the percentage of people who asked for the deferral?
We didn't ask them to ask for it at that time.
Oh,
We
okay.
just gave it to everyone in March and in September. And so that's the change on this one. In March and even later, it wasn't as clear that some were going to do well. And we had some history that some were continuing to make principal payments. And so that was a clear indication that some were doing fine, and we know which ones those are. So we don't expect, to get requests from those who've been able to make those payments.
Any other questions for Auditor Powers? The one question I was going to bring up was just whether or not the committee discussed any new loans not having deferrals. I don't know if that was considered.
It wasn't. I know we didn't discuss it at that time. Probably because it seems, to me anyway, it seems pretty obvious that you wouldn't make a request in the middle of the pandemic if you didn't have a plan to make payments initially. But because you brought that up, we're having a meeting next Monday and we will discuss it at that time. I can tell you now, I don't think, I think it will be quickly discussed and decided that, well, I shouldn't pre-decide it, but I'll tell you, I thought it might be. So anyway.
It's good to get your insight. Thank you. And I wasn't trying to draw any lines in the sand or anything. I just thought that was an important thing to consider. So
yeah, I just think that's why it wasn't considered. If most people were thinking like I am. If you were thinking that it was really difficult to make a payment, you'd probably wait until the pandemic was largely over before you made the request. Well, how I would think of it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, seemed like we didn't have any other questions. So I would look for a motion.
Chairman Mills?
Yes, Commissioner Storley.
Yes. I was just reflecting back in March when we were dealing with the beginning of the pandemic and how much we wanted to support the businesses. And I think, there's been monies coming in, COVID money and other monies. I think it's still a struggle for our businesses. Right now, some of them can open at 25% capacity. It's still not good, but I totally support supporting them as long as we can, at least up through June 30th, and then review it at that time.
Mr. Chair, I'd just add too, we didn't add any documentary proof of the need. We didn't want to burden some of the small businesses with additional paperwork, et cetera. And it's pretty clear that some of them will need it. So.
Yes, thank you. And it's probably worth pointing out too, just the financial implications for our budget or the lack thereof.
Yeah, this money is originally state money. There's never been a dime of levy money that's gone to support this fund. It's all been interest earnings. And there won't be any lost revenue. In fact, the more we can help them survive and get over this, the more of them that will continue to make their payments afterwards if they survive this. So we actually feel it's in our financial interest to provide, as a fund, to provide this to make sure that they're still viable and make, because there's no forgiveness of payments. They just start up again in a few months.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. All right. Any other questions, or did you want to make a motion there, Commissioner Storley?
Yes, I might as well. I'll go ahead and make a motion to extend the loan payment deferral to March 30th of 21.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Storley. Do we have support?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Storley,
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins,
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well for unanimous approval there. Thank you, Auditor Powers.
Thank you.
And let's jump back up to Land Services with Director Nelson there. We have an item for potentially adding a member to the Planning Commission. Good morning, Tim.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and everyone. I do apologize for not being set at my time on the agenda. It would always happen like this. I thought for sure there was enough time to have taken this call I got in before the agenda item came up, and it just ran a little late. So I apologize for that.
Well, no big deal, but just out of curiosity, could you hear me calling your name?
I could hear a little murmuring in the background, and then I saw my other phone light up for messages. I saw an email come through, so I thought I better wrap this up. And
light started flashing.
Yeah. That's what we need. I need a buzzer, one of those klaxon alarms.
Yeah.
But in any case, this agenda item actually should go for fairly smooth. We did have a resignation from the Planning Commission. Greg Mueller from the West End tendered his resignation in a couple weeks ago. And typically we actually have difficulty finding participants for the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment. In years past, we've gone as long as a year plus without actually having a member of the community willing to go ahead and fill a spot. And in this circumstance, by the time that we are at this morning's meeting, I've actually heard from 3 people. This one here, and what we tend to want to do is to keep the representation of the citizenry on the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment kind of dispersed geographically, so that we would have equal kind of representation from different areas up the trail on the East End, the West End, and such. Greg Mueller is over on the West End, and the application that was first submitted and sent to me by April was from Charles Anderson over in Tofty, and he's been a property owner over there on the West End for over 40 years. And you should have a copy of his application, and I guess I would just either entertain any questions that you might have or recommend his appointment to the Planning Commission. This is just to the Planning Commission at this point. We do have a meeting tomorrow night, and so if you did appoint him, he would be able to participate in our meeting tomorrow night.
Very good. Thank you, Director Nelson. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve Charles Anderson for the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. We have a motion. Do we have support?
Storley support.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. We have unanimous approval. Thank you very much, Director Nelson. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
And before we get into our next item, is probably going to be, well, it's bad news, but it could be a difficult conversation. But I would like to take just a 5-minute break, if I may, and we'll meet at 9:43 or thereabouts. I'll be patient with everyone. Thank you. All right, I see we have all commissioners and Administrator Yorkie, Attorney Hicken, Assessor Thompson, Auditor Powers. Are you there as well?
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. All right, it's 9:44, and let's resume our meeting here. Under the administrator portion, we have a miscalculation of 2021 tax revenue, which we can discuss. And Administrator Yorkie, I'll turn it over to you to give a synopsis of what's happened and what our options are.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, commissioners. So as the agenda item indicates, we learned over the holidays that there had been an error in spreadsheet data that was used to calculate the tax base for 2021. This was related to the valuation of 36 state-assessed commercial properties. And the impact of the miscalculation is that our tax revenue for 2021 is going to be about $177,000 less than we originally expected. There are several reasons why this occurred. The Department of Revenue provides us with a report on the values of those parcels every year. And in 2020, they used a new report format that included additional data that we don't use to estimate the tax base. But those values that we're not supposed to use were actually transposed into the spreadsheet that we use to calculate the tax base for the county. There were also the same year, there were changes in assessments related to privately owned vacation rentals as commercial property. And the increase in those figures made the error in the state assessed commercial properties harder to detect. Another mitigating factor is that the assessor's office was short-staffed last summer when the error occurred. And then also there was some review of the data, but ultimately there wasn't sufficient review to catch the error before the numbers were provided to the auditor treasurer's office. So I indicate in the memo, I've spoken with Bob Thompson about this. I think we both have a full understanding of how this happened. I think it's really important to note that this was an honest error and one that, I think for anybody who works with spreadsheets at all, it's something that can easily happen when you're working with spreadsheet data. And we've talked about the need to change processes to make sure that if something like this does happen in the future, that it is more readily caught. And after having that conversation with Mr. Thompson, I'm very confident that we're going to be able to catch these kinds of things in the future. So where we are now, we have, again, a tax base that is less than what we anticipated. If the Board of Commissioners does nothing else, what would happen is that the tax base would be recalculated based on the corrected number. The net effect of that would be that the property taxes for all taxpayers in the county would be slightly higher than we anticipated they would be. We did indicate at the Truth and Taxation meetings in December that all things being held constant for a homestead property owner who had no change in assessed value for 2021, they would actually pay a slightly lower amount of tax than they did the previous year. With the shortfall in revenues, if the board does nothing else, the same taxpayer would pay slightly higher taxes by about 1% in 2021. Now, there are a couple of ways that the board could choose to reduce the impact to taxpayers, both involving use of fund balance to make up the $177,000 deficit. And so one option would be to use the full $177,000 of fund balance to shore up the budget, which in that case, homestead property owners whose assessed value did not change from the previous year would see approximately a 0.7% decrease in their 2021 tax bills. Another approach would be to use part of the fund balance and also distribute the remaining dollar amount across the tax base. So for example, if you decided to use $100,000 of fund balance and then spread the remaining $77,000 across the tax base, basically that same homestead property owner that I mentioned earlier would not see any change in his tax payment from the previous year. So the important thing to know is that the auditor has checked with the State Department of Revenue. They're fully aware of the situation, and we're not subject to any penalties as a result of this miscalculation. So regardless of how you decide to resolve this, we're not going to be facing any consequence from the state. But it's important to note that the tax bills will go out in March. And so to the extent the board decides it wants to use fund balance to address this issue, it would need to make a decision by the end of this month so that changes could be entered into the system before property owners get their tax bills. And with that, I will pause. Mr. Thompson is here to answer any detailed questions that you may have, and I'd be happy to try and answer questions as well.
All right. Thank you, Administrator Yorkie. And yeah, I it almost felt like when we were having our levy discussions, it almost felt like it was too good to be true, and sure enough, it seems that way. And you know, I understand the why, and I understand that it did happen, and I understand that there's been conversations about how this will not happen again, and I understand the significant factor of the short-term rentals into the mix, how that throws everything kind of up in the air, and you know, good luck keeping all the pieces straight there with that. But and now you said the state auditor's office is aware, and then also
the State Department of Revenue. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's what I was going to ask about, and just so they're aware of everything as well. And yeah, I guess I'd like to ask the board first for questions, and then after we have some questions answered, I'd like to move into discussing what we think our best steps would be to address this. Who has questions?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Sullivan.
As I look at it, there's really two issues. The first thing we want to do is obviously avoid the potential for this to happen again, which involves planning and process. And then I think the second thing we need to address is how do we fix it for this budget cycle? So I'd like to try to look at it in those two different ways, if we could.
Very good. Yep.
And so in terms of process, we have had that conversation with Bob. And Bob, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about what we're going to be putting in place to make this thing less likely to happen in the future?
Certainly. I appreciate the opportunity. So, you know, as we had kind of discussed, incorporating like a checklist and a thorough procedure instruction manual into our assessment calendar, where, you know, we already have these push notices that come, you know, when we're supposed to put a notice in the paper, we have a push notice that lets us know, hey, this is the week to put an ad in the paper for the upcoming, you know, meeting or deadline, whatever it might be. We will be incorporating a checklist and thorough instructions so that somebody reviews the initial person who enters this information into our system, that a second person does a review of that work. So that's the plan moving forward. You know, we are developing all of our policies and manuals right now. We literally don't have much in the way of a training manual or a succession plan, to say the least. So it's something we've been working with revenue on. That's actually, you know, one of the items that appointment they had discussed is getting, you know, these policies and manuals created so that, you know, when we're working through this part of our assessment calendar, that we're following the proper procedures for those.
Thank you, Assessor Thompson. And my impression of, well, clearly, you know, this mistake is, you know, we're aware of that. I guess my question was also, is there a way to get a push notification or what have you, if there are a certain percentage change, if there's a threshold we could set for that, or if that's just a manual thing that needs to be watched?
Yeah, certainly. You know, we looked at these numbers. In fact, right when we started the initial budget talks, we kind of looked at some of these numbers, and, you know, it just because this year we had so many changes with the vacation rentals, it didn't stand out. In a typical, more typical year where the assessment numbers don't have those big swings in classification and value moving, you know, we had $100 million of value moving in classification in 2020. So, you know, that's something that moving forward certainly set a threshold and say, you know, this is something we need to look further into if we're seeing a number that appears to have increased, you know, significantly in a certain segment or classification of value. You know, I in the report I have on my website right now on the assessor's webpage, I actually had a taxpayer call and ask some questions about if we had raised values on a specific classification, because that's what it appeared. You know, it looked like in 2019 seasonal rec had a certain value, and then in 2020 it had another value, and that gave the impression to them that we had made adjustments based on seasonal classifications and not homesteads, which it wasn't. I mean, it was obviously he just wasn't understanding the data was showing the shift from vacation rentals. So that is certainly something that we can implement into our you know, review at the end of the year when we send our assessment books over to Brady. You know, this happens right about the T&T talks, you know, right before we set that preliminary levy.
Okay, does anyone have any more questions regarding the process to prevent this from happening again?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Well, we have been involved with short-term rental now for, I would say, maybe 3 years, Bob. You know, the numbers are growing, and here we have 36 now that have been looked at, and it is all part of a process for the assessor's office to, you know, get the information that's timely. And the fact that they have then presented to you a new format, it all kind of, and then on top of it, to have a pandemic, and then on top of that, to be short-staffed, you know, in the office, it just ends up to be a situation where I think in the future, like you say, with the process and how to avoid this again, I'm sure will happen.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, with the limited resources, it was something that, you know, slipped through the cracks, and I do, you know, take full accountability for it. It's something that I can guarantee will not happen while I'm in this office again. You know, we're trying to turn the page and move forward with the new staff we've got. We're still kind of treading the water that, you know, from 2020 that we're trying to catch up with all of our assessment and information, and with all the things we had going on in the office, the vacation rentals on top of our quintile. And, you know, 2020 is actually our biggest quintile number that we have of all 5 years. So it just, there are multiple things compounding, and not having that policy in place for a formal review is how this kind of slipped through the cracks. And I think, again, you know, without those vacation rental changes, this would have stood out in the raw data. It would have been caught in any typical assessment year right away.
Okay. Commissioner Hawkins, thank you.
So you say you're developing policy manuals and a succession plan. When can we expect to have you say, yes, that's done? I've taken care of that.
Well, so the Department of Revenue, you know, when they gave me a 2-year temporary appointment, and those are a couple of items that are on their, you know, they do an office review when you're appointed. They come up, they kind of review everything that you've got in place, and they make some suggestions. I've kind of told Revenue that I'm hoping to have things done, you know, this spring. That will be in June is actually when my 2-year review is up. So I'm hoping that by June, you know, mid-June, when they come and do my office review again, that I have at least the training manual for an appraiser. I mean, that's the entry level, and you kind of build off of that. I know when I started and what we have right now is kind of a patchwork training manual. There's some instruction on processes and stuff, but for the most part, it's a lot of stuff about, you know, related to HR, how you get your healthcare and how you operate your voicemail. And it's just manuals that have been printed out and put into a binder. And there's really no flow of the assessment calendar. You know, typically we actually I have PowerPoints for, you know, all 4 seasons of the year. When we go into the Board of Appeals, we have a training PowerPoint that we review right before that process starts. When we go into quintile inspections, we have a PowerPoint that we review. And part of what I'm doing, which I think is kind of unique in the state right now, is I'm doing live video demonstration. While I go through these PowerPoints, I'm talking on the screen. It's all started because of these virtual meetings we're doing, but it's a really good way to get a lot of information to somebody versus just going through a paper manual. They can just watch a video. There's actually bookmarks in there. So if they're worried or if they're wondering how to do one specific process, like say land, they could just go to the land bookmark in that video and rewatch that section. So we are developing a really thorough manual, and you know, I'm taking a lot of pride in making a manual that's somewhat unique. In fact, I've talked with Pamela about we're going to get a software that allows us to implement like a quiz. So when somebody does a training video, then at the end they have a 10-question quiz just to kind of make sure that they're, you know, catching the most important information. So I hope to fulfill that June deadline to have the most basic training manual for, you know, entry level. And one of the things that I've said I was going to do above and beyond that was create like a succession plan for if an assessor ever has to take over, they know, you know, exactly how the calendar lays out, when they have these deadlines, these push notifications, and where they come from and how to set those up. So I will hope by June. And if it's not ready by June, I mean, we are really trying to catch up with the 2020 assessment right now. The Board of Appeals, it adjourns June 18th, and that's kind of when we really turn our page and shift gears. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure relieved when we move into our next quintile in the beginning of summer next year. So.
Okay. Well, I certainly do appreciate the work that you and your office does, and you know, I think the work that we've collaborated on with the short-term rental legislation, as well as, you know, developing these policies and manuals, I think speaks highly of you and your department. And mistakes happen. Clearly, we want to prevent them as much as we can. Thank you for recognizing, you know, the failures and taking responsibility for that. I guess the next steps are now that we've talked about the process to prevent this from happening is how would the board like to address the shortfall? Does anyone want to ask questions about those options, or does anyone have strong opinions right out of the gate here?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Sullivan?
So knowing that we have $177,000 less than anticipated in our tax policy, and I feel very comfortable with the process that Bob has described about how he's going to develop training manuals and a succession plan. Now we're left to figure out how to cover this. And I would like to talk a little bit about the idea of splitting the difference between taxpayers and our fund balance. Normally I would go to that fund balance, but with all the concerns and unknowns about COVID and what's going to happen with our budget in the future, I feel that we can't take all of it out of our fund balance. And so could we look at splitting the difference between the taxpayers, or maybe looking at that 100,000 coming out of our fund balance and the 77,000 out of the taxpayers? What would that look like specifically? If we could go over that.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Are you asking about the impacts of that kind of split, or
Correct. I'd like to review those particular numbers for our public and for all of us.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in.
Please.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, please, go ahead.
Oh, okay. With the scenario that Commissioner Sullivan is describing, if we were to use $100,000 of fund balance and distribute the remaining $77,000 across the property tax base, the homestead property owner whose assessed value was level with the previous year would not see any change in the amount of tax paid from last year to this year. So basically, it would be a way of holding people harmless.
Do we have, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hawkins, go ahead.
So homestead taxpayers would see no change. What about commercial properties?
I believe the answer is the same. Brady, can you confirm that?
Correct. It just depends on if their value and class didn't change, and class only matters because it'll change your value. But so basically, if your valuation doesn't change, then with that use of fund balance, there'd be no change in the tax, in the county tax, just the county line alone. Most people won't see that because usually there's some variation, but in general.
Okay. Do we have any idea of the number of properties that did not change in value or did change in value?
That honestly would be really difficult to say. At the end of last year, we didn't do a county-wide adjustment. We targeted adjustments based off of our sales ratio studies. So I know like Lakeshore properties, West End properties, those saw increases. We didn't adjust Grand Marais. Grand Marais was still in line. The ratios were okay from our 2019 quintile review. So, you know, a number of properties in Grand Marais didn't see an increase. And in fact, if we don't apply an end of the year adjustment to a building or a land, then it will automatically have depreciation in those buildings. So I would say, I mean, it's probably 50-50, but I would almost even be comfortable saying the majority of properties would see that decrease, the depreciation of their building improvements, because we haven't been able to turn that depreciation off. That's something I've talked about with the Department of Revenue, is in an appreciating market like we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, at least 5 years probably now, you tend to want to turn that depreciation off. But if we do that, say we have a 80-year-old building that hasn't been improved, all of our depreciation that we've done over the last 80 years would go away, and it would be valued at, you know, new construction. So we can't turn the depreciation off. We can adjust the tables so that they don't depreciate 1% for the next year. That would involve going in. We have 100-year depreciation on a residential structure. So if it sits for 100 years without an adjustment or an improvement made to it, then it would be worth nothing. What we would have to do is go through each 100 tables and adjust it from 100% to a 99, or from a 99 to 100, from a 98 to a 99. So it's something we can do to try and offset depreciation. But like I said, we can't target specific areas. We would have to do this countywide. Doing things like that is really nerve wracking when you don't know what's going to happen. But to answer your specific question, I think that there's a very big number of properties that didn't see an increase unless they were within the quintile or in an area that was indicating we had to do some increases, like Lakeshore property. I know West End Lake saw it a lot. Lake Superior saw it in Tofty, Schroeder, Lutzen, as well as some of the inland lakes like Caribou, Tate Lake, and some of the smaller lakes in Lutzen. So it was really more targeted adjustments last year because we're trying to get better information into the system so that we can do more consistent adjustments across the board. But in some areas, if I were to go and apply the same adjustment that I did in Lutzen to Grand Marais, people's values in Grand Marais would have been too high based on our sales ratio study. So we target market value on these properties, but they say that an assessor that, is really doing a good job has about a 98% sales ratio. So you're just kind of below that market value. And then there's also a measurement that we measure the variation from the low end properties to the high end properties. We look at the coefficient of dispersion, and those have to be within a certain range. Otherwise you have to make more targeted adjustments. So, you want to have a more progressive assessment.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. That helps helps give me perspective there. Any other questions or at this point suggestions on how to address the shortfall? Commissioner Hawkins.
Yeah, I'm wondering about cutting the budget, doing a combination, including figuring out, can we ask departments to figure out, are there ways you can cut 1% out of your budget to help alleviate this problem? I'm wondering about sending this to the Budget Advisory Committee that did a lot of work with the previous budget, going back to them and asking for their advice.
So just a blanket cut.
Well, for at least a portion of it, because 1% wouldn't cover it all, but to make a good faith effort.
Yeah, well, I think at least my perspective of what I've seen is that departments don't inflate the budgets. They pretty much cover their costs. So if we did a 1%, it would be more or less of operating than departments need. But I don't know that. I guess I'm open. I'm certainly open to sending it to the Budget Advisory Committee. But what had come from that committee was good policy work, and then looking over this current year's budget. I think if their advice would have been to cut things 1%, we would have heard about that. But I know the situation has changed now. But I think that's an option we can certainly discuss. Administrator Yorkie.
Yeah, I know that a lot of the work that was done to develop the 2021 budget occurred before I got here. But I do recall talking with Rena Rogers about the work that the budget committee did. And I know that in her role as interim administrator, when they were starting the process of developing the budget, she asked the directors to keep their budgets for 2021 as flat as possible. And that was predicated on the pandemic, knowing that there were going to be a lot of financial uncertainties. And so my understanding of that process is that there was really a drive to keep the budget as flat as possible. And so, and that budget, just as a reminder, was approved less than a month ago. We could open that can of worms. It would probably be I'm just not sure about the impact. I mean, I think we have the budget set for 2021. We've got a slate of services that we're providing under that budget. We're covering our personnel and insurance costs with that. And I think it would be a challenge to restart that process. I think it would probably take a lot of time, and I'm not sure that it would be worth the effort.
Chairman Mills?
Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Well, what we have before us is 177,000. So Commissioner Sullivan's one suggestion was to split the difference. Well, that'd be 88.5. We've worked hard to develop and build that general fund. And I believe Brady would say that is for situations that arise before us, that the money is there for those situations. This is a situation. So I would like to see the 100,000 come out of the general fund, and then we work with the 77,000.
Thank you, Commissioner Storley. To be clear, you're suggesting, and I think Commissioner Sullivan was suggesting something similar, unless I've got it flipped, but you're suggesting 100,000 coming out of the reserve balance and 77,000 coming out of the levy.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Sullivan, is that what you were saying, or were you saying, that's what I thought you were saying?
That is correct. Yeah, I really support that. I think it's a good way to handle the situation.
Okay. Commissioner Hawkins, what do you think about that suggestion?
Well, I think that's a compromise. I am concerned. Yeah, I'm just concerned that we're asking the taxpayers to continue to fix this mistake without asking county employees, is there any way you can help contribute to figuring out how we can reduce our levy? I just think some departments may be able to say, hey, you know what? We could put off this capital purchase this year, or we could make an adjustment over here. They weren't asked to do that. And I just think it's just the good faith effort. This was a county mistake, and I totally get it was a mistake. But let's bind together as county employee. I'm not in county employee anywhere, sorry. But what can we do as a county to say, hey, you know what? We're going to support one of our own here. We're going to help make, and not just go to the taxpayers to make them pay for it. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, and one of my concerns, Administrator Yorkie, I'd just like to comment, if I may. One of my concerns is bringing the data that we had to the Truth in Taxation meeting, showing that a property whose value did not increase would have a decrease in taxes. And so my concern would be to present that and then go and have an increase in taxes. I feel like that's not fair at all. If I'm understanding the numbers right, that Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Storley, I guess they're the same numbers, it would put things at a zero property tax increase. And I feel like that is a pretty good compromise. But you know, if in regards to your suggestion and concerns, Commissioner Hawkins, if we looked at this, if we knew about this before we set the levy, those costs would still be coming from the taxpayers. So and the fund reserve is also taxpayer money. So it's all taxpayers one way or another. It's just how we manage the taxpayers' dollars. And I certainly don't want to put any more burden on county staff. I want to support staff as much as possible and to keep things as smooth and efficient as possible. Instead of jumping back and forth, I would like to onward motion. And so I don't quite understand I don't understand the 1% cut, I guess, how that would change. It seems to me it would be operating at less than what we need. And that's how we get into situations where we have to jack things up significantly more down the road. Not right now. That's also the situation if you whittle down our fund reserve, which sounds like we're contemplating here, is if we did that on the regular, we're going to have significant adjustments again. So that's really what I'm trying to minimize, is any large moves, and I don't like changing the numbers whatsoever. But I think this idea of the split with 100,000 from fund reserve is a pretty decent compromise. Administrator Yorkie.
Yeah, you made the point that I was going to, which is that the fund balance is public dollars. So, I mean, it is taxpayer money.
Yeah, it's just how we manage it, and my biggest concern is how we communicate how we're managing it. And so I didn't want to do a bait and switch where, hey, your taxes are going down, now they're going up. I'm trying to keep, from my perspective, I try to keep that as level as possible. So to say your taxes are going down 0.7% and now they're going to be 0, I think is understandable, especially considering the circumstances. But was there more you wanted to talk about, Commissioner Hawkins, in regards to that compromise or the idea of the 1% cut?
Yeah, I guess I'm not familiar with the total budget. I never did get to see a final budget book that the committee worked with final numbers. I just was wondering what could be in there with that had capital expenses or things that maybe could be delayed. That's all. And what are asking, I did ask the engineer, if I asked you to cut 1% of your budget, where would it come from? Well, he gave me an answer. I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but at least they were asked. And is there a way we could help so we didn't use all fund balance? People could still get their decrease. I don't know. That's why my recommendation was maybe the budget committee should look at this again one more time. That's where I was coming from.
Okay. Just as a point of clarification, I'm not very comfortable with asking department heads directly hypotheticals like budget cuts. I mean, it's kind of like asking, if you were to cut one employee, who would it be? I think that sort of conversation, I think, should be happening like today we're having at the board level, and with the administrative form of government that we adopted through administrator, and then we can discuss. But I don't know how fair it is to ask department heads for hypothetical cuts. That I'm not sure if that's helping us build the team that we want to have, but I guess maybe that's a discussion for another time. But it can set us up for difficult situations. But I think what you're asking is just what could be delayed and what not. And as Administrator Yorkie said, I think the budget committee more or less went through that because of COVID, and so now we're still there. And that's always a good question to have when we're going through the budget process. And this is certainly an oddity as far as that process is concerned. Any other thoughts from other commissioners? Commissioner Sullivan.
I would just feel uncomfortable going back and reviewing an approved budget and looking for that 1%. I think we have an approved budget and that we need to deal with this particular situation now. And I still feel like the idea of compromise is real important. And that if we can look at taking that 100,000 out of the fund balance and spreading out that 77,000 among the taxpayers, that that is going to be an effective and an efficient way to deal with the situation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable from my perspective. Commissioner Storley, is that has the conversation changed your view of things, or are you coming at it the same as Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes, I am. And I don't really know when you say that we're going to spread it out among the taxpayers, 77,000. I don't know, Administrator Yorkie or Brady, how many really would be affected?
Well, everybody would be slightly affected because everybody's tax would go up marginally to make up that difference. So all residential, commercial.
Okay, a small percentage.
Correct. And I see Bob raising his hand.
Yeah, so thank you. I think it might be important for one of the numbers we discussed yesterday was like a $200,000 home. Let's say, how does this impact them? In the hypothetical that, say, the original budget we passed and everything that didn't change, we were projecting on that 200,000 about a $14 decrease in the tax bill, I believe. And with this middle ground, it would be zero, no change over last year. And with nothing done, it would be about a $20 increase. So there's about $38 on a $200,000 house that this impact, breaking it down to that individual taxpayer at a $200,000 hypothetical value. It's the difference of a full $28 change or $14 change or no change.
Okay. Better perspective.
I'm sorry. I talked over you, Commissioner Storley.
No, that's why I wanted to know a perspective on a homeowner, and Bob gave that to me.
I've got another angle I'd like to discuss, and I guess we'll probably need Brady for this. What if we do this middle ground that we're talking about with 100,000 from the fund balance, 77,000 from the levy? Where does that put our levy percentage? Because that's a reference point, that levy percentage that we often are looking at.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that would put the percentage at 2.98, roughly 3%. That's using 100,000 of the fund balance.
So that's less than our 30-year average.
It is, but it's clearly a once in a lifetime event. The COVID pandemic. So you would not expect to repeat this.
Well, that makes me less comfortable, but because I'd like to stay with the level steady, and a 30-year average seems pretty level and steady. But as you say, it is an oddity and a once in a lifetime situation. So, yeah. Okay. Any further discussion about this?
And just, I did the numbers on all the scenarios, and actually at 100,000 for $100,000 fund balance for a $100,000 homestead property, it's an addition of $3 over last year.
Can you say that once more? I'm sorry.
If we used $100,000 of fund balance and spread the 77,000 additional over, it's not additional, it's the same levy, but over less value, it would cause about a $3 increase in tax payment for a $100,000 homestead, just in county tax.
Okay.
That's the scenario you're discussing right now.
Okay. Well, Commissioner Hawkins has expressed interest in passing this on to the Budget Committee again. Do other commissioners want to do that at all, or should we take action now, or what are our thoughts?
Chairman Mills,
Commissioner Storley.
I would like to take action now.
All right. I guess probably the next step would be putting into a motion what our plan of attack is here. What we had been discussing, at least two of us here, it was $100,000 from the fund balance and the remainder from the levy. Commissioner Sullivan?
I'd like to move that we take $100,000 from the fund balance and spread the $77,000 out through the taxpayers.
Okay, there's a motion to take from Commissioner Sullivan to take $100,000 from the fund balance and the remainder from the levy, or taxpayers in Commissioner Sullivan's words. Is there support?
Storley, support.
Okay, there's a motion with support. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Storley?
Aye.
Commissioner Hawkins?
Nay.
All right, and Commissioner Mills is aye. Passes 3-1. Thank you all for the very, very good and I think thorough discussion. Thank you for providing additional information, Administrator Yorkie and Assessor Thompson and Auditor Powers. Very rough situation, and I am, I guess, as pleased as I can be with how we've addressed it. Well, I guess the next item would be Administrator updates, Administrator Yorkie.
All right, and I have several things this week. Commissioner Hawkins brought to my attention that when we had the organizational meeting last week, for some reason, the Airport Advisory Committee was not on the list. And so that committee has its next meeting before this board has its next meeting. And so Commissioner Hawkins indicated a desire to have the board take action to appoint a member and an alternate.
Do we know when that meeting is?
We can get that in just a moment.
The 21st of January. And I would just want to express that I have interest in that committee with background that I have.
Very good. So you're volunteering to, or you're hoping to serve as the the primary representation on the airport committee?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Sullivan.
I have had interest in that particular position because my district includes the airport, and I have had comments about that during my campaign and feel it would be valuable to my constituents to be on that committee as the lead. If Stacy, you would be willing to be the alternate.
Feel free to discuss. It looks like there's less enthusiasm as an alternate from Commissioner Hawkins, and I don't know how best to resolve this. But you know, the past seat was in Commissioner Dukirk, District 4. I am familiar with Commissioner Hawkins's experience there, and certainly can see that that value. Well, let's yeah, Commissioner Sullivan.
I would just like to say that when Heidi and I spoke prior to the end of the 2020 year, that she strongly suggested that I continue in that role.
Okay.
For the
Commissioner
precise
Hawkins.
reason that I shared, that there are a lot of residents of District 4 that are interested and have concerns and have voice that needs to be heard.
Commissioner Hawkins, did you have something more to say too?
I just want to say, I'm certainly not going to arm wrestle you, Ann, for this job, okay? And I expressed my interest. It's been stated. I think I have some background, but like I said, I am not willing to make this a big issue. That's not what I want to do.
That's very gracious, and I certainly, as board chair, appreciate that. I can see where the residents of District 4 would want to have as direct as possible representation with you know, a facility like that being in the district. So, but I am, as I said, very familiar. Not very familiar. I'm familiar, Commissioner Hawkins, with your background there. So that made sense to me too. But please, someone can.
So, okay, I'll not nominate Ann in the spirit of all this. I will nominate Ann as the primary to the Airport Commission.
Thank you, Stacy.
Commissioner Hawkins, you are willing to be the alternate, though, correct?
Yes, I am.
And the idea is you would receive communications there and would be very valuable, be in the loop,
Correct.
and even potentially attend meetings when attendance is back in session there. Okay. Well, thank you very much, you two, for both your willingness and, as I say, your graciousness with understanding the district's needs. Do we need to make a motion there? Commissioner Hawkins made the nomination, and I think we just need to formalize it.
Okay, I'll make the motion if you need a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hawkins. Is there support?
Starley, support.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins?
Aye.
Commissioner Starley?
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Please continue, Administrator Yorkie.
Thank you. So the next item on my list is I wanted to let you know and let the public know that we are now accepting applications for business relief grants under through funding that the state provided. On the 8th, this past Friday, the EDA posted applications and guidelines for applying on its website, that is prosperitynorth.org. And so if you go to the EDA website, you can download the grant application. This is open to businesses and also not-for-profits in Cook County. There's a maximum award of $7,500, $7,500. And so the application period opened Friday, January 8th. Applications must be received by the EDA at noon on Friday, January 22nd. We're going to be reviewing grants after that, or applications, I should say, and grant awards will be announced on Friday, February 5th. And we have to award all the grant dollars by March 15th of this year. And so we have a total of $250,000 that will be awarded in grants. So I encourage all county businesses and not-for-profits to apply for that. And more information about the grant evaluation criteria is on the EDA's website. The next thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that we are continuing the interview process for the Public Information Coordinator. We are doing second round interviews this week, and I'm hopeful that at the next board meeting, I'll have more information about the status of that recruitment. Wanted to mention that I did a visit to the Highway Department campus on Friday to look at its buildings and to see some of the issues that they're contending with. We were talking about deferring capital projects, and the Highway Department campus is a great example of the not so great things that can happen when you do that. They have a cold storage building that has a number of beams that are rotted out, and I've heard our maintenance director, Brian Silence, say that he's afraid that that building is one windstorm away from collapsing on all the equipment inside it. Which would obviously be a very expensive problem to have. And then also there are issues with fumes from the maintenance area getting into the office space there. And so we're in the process of trying to characterize some of the issues that need to be addressed there. And we'll be coming forward to you with more information about that in the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the Association of Minnesota Counties is having its County Government 101 training starting next week. And I know that I think most, if not all of you, are signed up to take that training. It's a great overview of how county government works and kind of the processes. And I think it's going to be especially useful for the two new commissioners. And I think we've also invited the two commissioner candidates for the first district to participate in that as well. The last thing on my list, and Commissioner Hawkins, I don't know if you want to bring this up under your comments or if you'd like to address it now, but Commissioner Hawkins notified me and Attorney Hicken that NCLUB is planning to file a brief regarding the Enbridge Line 3 pipeline project. And let me just, if you will indulge me, I just want to pull up some information about that. I know that Attorney Hicken has reviewed some information and can summarize the implications for the filing of this brief and how that may impact us here in Cook County. Molly, do you want to, well, actually, I'll pause and say, Commissioner Hawkins, do you want to say anything about that?
Well, this was something that the NCLUB, I guess, has been working on for a few months. Myron was part of all this. So when I attended the meeting for the first time, it was the first time I'd heard about it. So I just reached out like, okay, I've never read one of these before. What does this mean? So that's where James and Molly were very helpful in helping me navigate what is this. So that's all I have.
And so, Attorney Hicken, do you want to add any comments to this?
Certainly. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Hawkins, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I'll just describe in general that the amicus brief that has been drafted by NCLUB It doesn't mean that Cook County or N-Club is a party to any lawsuit. Any entity or individual can request permission from the court to provide additional information or arguments for the court to consider, and it's called an amicus brief. We don't have a stake in the outcome of the lawsuit except as described in this document. And after reviewing the document, certainly not my area or specialty in law, but in general, it argues against any further regulatory, environmentally based regulatory barriers to the Line 3 project. I think maybe the sentence that was the most concerning or Commissioner Hawkins probably took note of most was a sentence that says the citizens of northern Minnesota generally and the county commissioner members of N-Club specifically are both confused and frustrated by the abstruse political intervention in the Enbridge Line 3 regulatory process manifest by the Walz administration. And that's in the introductory paragraphs before it gets to the legal argument. I don't personally know a lot of the background of the amicus brief. I would presume that the N-Club had a vote and there was majority support among N-Club members to pursue the possibility of submitting an amicus brief. But I think Mr. Yorkie and perhaps Commissioner Hawkins have had further discussions and maybe can enlighten the board as to any potential actions they can take. But it's my understanding that N-Club members were asked to provide input by tomorrow.
Oh, you're muted, Commissioner
Sorry.
Hawkins.
Actually, it was going to the printer today. So it was kind of like not a lot of time to discuss with the board. So I'm just informing you.
Okay, so to be clear, is the Northern Counties Land Use Board looking for input from our county board or just from the member representation?
Well, I did get more clarification yesterday. It turns out, so N-Club is 9 counties. Some counties have 2 commissioners, others have 1 commissioner. All the other counties have passed resolutions in support of this. We are the only county that has not. But I don't know where we asked to before and chose not to. I don't know that history. I haven't had time to look into that again. So that's the background on this. There was no formal vote as far as anybody remembers at N-Club. It was all by consensus, and a comment was made that Myron helped draft some of the language. And I just didn't feel like I had just gotten it. Had no time to read it. I did not question his work on this. So.
And so, I guess, are we being asked for anything here? No. Okay.
No, just it's for your knowledge to know that's what this board is doing.
Do we, as commissioners, want to give feedback or take a position or make a statement, or what are our feelings there? Commissioner Sullivan. You're on mute.
I know that during my campaign, this was an issue that came up, and I do not feel that the majority of Cook County would support this brief, and I would be concerned about our name being on it. Is there any course of action we can take to indicate that Cook County does not support this based on the numerous environmental concerns that many of our residents are passionate about. Just thinking of chats we've had about climate change and clean water, and this moves in a different direction because this is about crude oil from Alberta coming across Minnesota, and it violates 1854 treaty rights, which is a concern to people here in Cook County. And it's the dirtiest oil in the world. I personally would not feel that our county would want our name on this.
Administrator Yorkie.
Yeah, for folks who are watching and aren't familiar with the project, the pipeline alignment doesn't actually go through. It does come across, it enters northwestern Minnesota from Canada and kind of snakes diagonally down toward the northeastern corner of the state, but it does not go through Cook County. So that's just important to note.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please, Commissioner Hawkins.
Well, I would just like to point out that we've been a member of N-Club for quite a few number of years. If we come out now in opposition to this at this very late date, we might as well write off this club. We will not be able to go and work with these other county commissioners on Cook County land issues. They're going to say, hey, you didn't support us? I mean, that's just natural. So I would make sure that you understand the ramifications. We can all be concerned about clean water. We all are. But this, I actually said to both Molly and James in an email, this is the perfect example of when I said I wanted more information about what commissioners are doing at boards. This is it. The fact that I was blindsided at my very first meeting, I spent the weekend a little upset. So I'm just letting you know, I'm not totally opposed to this brief. I've read it a couple times. Granted, I'm not a legal scholar. I don't really have concerns with the way that it's being presented. But I think the board should have known about this. That's where my concern comes in. So that's another 2 cents.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you. You make really good points about our partnership with the Northern Counties Land Use Board. As the alternate, I was able to attend a meeting and saw a little bit how that board functions, and saw Commissioner Bersheim's relationships there, and I know it can be really tricky because we're a very Cook County is very different than a lot of those counties, and we are very rural and very remote, so we have a lot of similarities as well, and there's similarities in the geography and the land types and the wetlands issues, and I think that's really the history of our participation on that board is the wetland issue and navigating that, and so I do see a lot of value in it, and boy, it makes it really difficult when our values differ from the rest of that board's views. So thank you for letting us know about it. Is there more, Commissioner Sullivan? Yes.
I'd just like to thank you, Commissioner Hawkins, for bringing it to our attention. It's something I was completely unaware of, and I appreciate your striving to communicate the information that we get at our committee meetings so we are all informed properly. Thank you.
Is there one thing that I guess I'll have my disagreements with one thing or another, but just the rhetoric, I guess, of that what was that line, Administrator Yorkie, about Governor Walz? That seemed a little out of place in my compromising walk the line mind.
Yeah, I actually, Molly read that. Molly, do you still have that up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Attorney Hicken.
Citizens of northern Minnesota generally and the county commissioner members of NCLUB are both confused and frustrated by the abstruse political intervention in the Enbridge Line 3 regulatory process manifest by the Walz administration.
Okay. Where I was going with that is I didn't know if we wanted to comment as a county to try to soften language, but I don't know. I just thank you again. Yes, please
Yeah,
go ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
I appreciate your comments, Chairman Mills, but it's too late. There's
Thank you.
nothing we
Yeah.
can do right now. It's too late. This is
Story of
just
my life.
heads up here. This is about procedures and process, like we were talking earlier. A mistake was made. I'm not saying this was a mistake, but we need to have more clear policies and procedures so nobody's blindsided. That's what we can do just for the next time.
Very good. Thank you. Any further comments there? All right, Administrator Yorkie, are you through with the administrator report?
I am, yes, sir.
All right, toggle to my agenda screen, and we're down to employee concerns, commissioner concerns, commissioner reports. Anyone have any further concerns or reports? Commissioner Sullivan.
I just was thinking about my last week and my first week serving as a commissioner, and I'm sure Stacy feels the same way. I feel like I've been diving into a swimming pool, and I didn't stick my toe in. I dove in, and I'm soaking wet. And the good news is I dove in with my eyes open, so I haven't hit anything yet. But I did spend this initial week just kind of organizing committee work and getting information on meeting dates that have changed due to COVID, and determining how to frame my work and my communication effectively with others, and reading all the agendas and reports and financials, and also having some quiet reflection. And I just want to take the time to thank those of you here who have listened to my questions and given me time to think about issues so that I can approach them in a real useful, practical fashion. And I've had an opportunity to hear from constituents about questions and concerns, and do my research and seek out assistance when I do need it, but being real careful to respect people's time and their workload. And I look forward to the rest of the month with a chance to dive in the deep end of the pool, and feel I'll be in a good spot as we get through all these, at least initial committee meetings. Thank you all.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. Any other commissioners have concerns or?
I have a report.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hawkins.
So I want to let you know that at NCLUB, the other issue that they are working on right now is state PILT money. And so over the weekend, I also started reading the 2012 DNR state PILT study. It's very fun reading. So they're talking about maybe going back to the legislature, doing some more research, updating this study, and going back to the legislature and trying to get increased funding for state lands for counties. So that's another issue they're working on. I went to the restorative justice. I had a telephone conversation, restorative justice, so I can get background information on that. That is going to be a very exciting. There's a presentation at Grand Portage this Thursday. That's going to be very exciting. And then my last meeting was the Extension Committee, and they're looking to fill some empty seats, or at least one maybe. So if you know anybody who wants extension, have them contact Diane Booth.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you,
over.
Commissioner Hawkins. Very, very good. Thank you. All right. Administrator Yorkie.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in, but Commissioner Hawkins' comment reminded me that the Joint Powers meeting that was tentatively planned to be held in Grand Portage, that may become a Zoom meeting. They were discussing the idea of doing that as an in-person but socially distant meeting. They've got a large meeting space up there that they thought they could do that safely. But due to a recent COVID case up there, I think that may change. I've not heard anything definite about that. But we'll share information about that when we get confirmation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had heard concerns from the public about what us as well, one email and various conversations, I guess, but just about what it says about us traveling and meeting in person. And I thought it very important for the sake of the joint powers to do that. But situations certainly change, and we're in a pandemic, and I completely understand people's concerns and wishing to be as safe as possible, and I support that. So please keep us posted. I think one other thing worth talking about is just about the upcoming election, and whether or not we'd like to have a special meeting to seat the winner of the District 3, or I'm sorry, District 1 seat. Thank you. Yeah. I'm in District 3. I believe the earliest we could do that would be on February 16th. I am not able to do that February 16th, nor would I be able to do it the 17th. That pushes at least my schedule to the 18th, and we have a regular meeting on the 23rd. So just looking for commissioners' thoughts on whether or not we should have a special meeting to seat the individual, and also the possibility of revisiting committee assignments at that time, because the District 1 commissioner would be taking on committees, and if there's any conflicts or a sharing of duties there, we could discuss that. But anyone have any thoughts on that? Commissioner Sullivan.
I do think it'll be a very valuable discussion to look at our committee assignments and make sure that there's some level of equity in the distribution of the committee assignments that we do have. So I look forward to that conversation, and also know that there are some just based on geography and history of District 1 that'll be important to make certain that the new commissioner has under his or her belt. Is there any reason we couldn't meet the second week of February following the election? Or do we need to wait until those results are certified?
Yeah, I believe that's the case. Okay. I think that's what brought it to the 16th, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just to.
Yes, please.
On that question of certified, so the election is on the 9th, and then we would have the canvas board 2 days later on the 11th, and that will certify the election. So you could meet anytime after that.
Well, that's very exciting. That changes my perspective right there. I'm sorry, I can't see the screen right now because I'm looking at my calendar and the wrong month at that.
So would Friday, the 12th be a possibility for a special meeting?
Yes, I do have a meeting at 1. And so I don't know how long the discussion would be, but I think I'm assuming it'd be shorter than our initial discussion. Otherwise, Thursday the 11th. Well, this gets to be quite tricky because there's a lot of assumptions made about the schedule of the winner of the election too. So, yeah. Otherwise, I was going to say the 11th is very open for me. So that would be after the canvassing board. But I like the idea of earlier rather than later, just to get that representation at the table. I think that's very important. But I don't know that there's going to be any decisions. There won't be any decisions made before the 23rd. So, you know,
Right.
we're talking about efficiency here too. So that's why I was hoping to have some discussion about it if anyone has some more thoughts there. Another thing worth pointing out is, you know, we will be taking care of our regular business on the 23rd. So if we add in the committee discussion, that's going to turn into a much longer meeting. I don't know if that's going to be more efficient or less efficient, more productive, less productive, that sort of thing.
Chairman Mills?
Please, Commissioner Storley, yes.
Thank you. Well, just in going over what we have before us that April, put everybody's boards, commissions, alternates, everything together, we have an overabundance in some of the areas. So I would hope that we would have that worked out. And we can already take what District 1 had. We can take that and build on it. And I would like to see that happen by that first board meeting in February, so that when we come together with the new district commissioner, that it would be pretty much set. Because when you come in new, you have no idea really for a lot of the things. Some of them, some of the boards and commissions, they may be already familiar with. But let's just take the example that's already there from District 1 and then build on that and have that, like I said, discussed at our first board meeting in February.
Okay, so to clarify, Commissioner Storley, that would be before the new commissioner is sat, that we would have the District 1 committees kind of lined out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's
With
quite
some,
fair.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner
But-
had suggested about a 20% across the board, committee and boards, and so with that in mind, we can try to be as fair as possible.
Could we look at meeting with our new commissioner on going back to that date that I believe Commissioner Mills tossed out, the 11th of February, and then reach out to both of the candidates to make certain that they would be available?
Yeah, that seems like a very fair approach. And so, to Commissioner Storley's point, if we have a much better handle by the 9th of what our overburdens are or needs to recalibrate schedules, we could know that by the 9th, and then on the 11th have that special meeting and go over that with the with the new commissioner. We can both meet them and go through the committee assignments then, and that is earlier by far than the 23rd. So I saw some head nods. Commissioner Sterling, how does that sound to you?
Well, it sounds good. That's quite a ways out for me right now. I'm not sure I could attend because that's really another meeting. So
On the 11th?
yeah.
Yeah,
Not
understood.
sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's try to figure that out, I guess. I'm gonna, I mean, not right meow necessarily, but let's, roll that around and try to work out our schedules to that date, see if it works. If we can schedule that just as long as we have adequate time. We cannot schedule it on the 9th because that's not adequate time. But if, say, by the 26th here, we're going to have a regular meeting, 26th of January. If we can know what our availability is on the 11th at that point, I think it'd be really helpful. And if Administrator Yorkie, you could reach out to the two candidates and communicate our intentions and our hopes. That's maybe the best path forward at this point. Unless others have concerns. Administrator Yorkie, yes, please.
Did I understand Brady correctly? So the results are going to be certified on the 11th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so does that provide happening like first thing in the day?
We can set that for any time we can arrange. 9 o'clock or even earlier.
I mean, I guess the trick there is we wouldn't know until that day who the winner is. And so in terms of trying to schedule it for the same day, I mean, I guess we'd have to ask both candidates to hold that space on their calendars.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I understand the difficulty there, and I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be pushy about it. I just was really looking forward to having the fifth seat filled. So if this is turning into
no, I think it's doable. I think it's doable. I just want to make sure I understand correctly what the board's desire is. So I can reach out to both candidates and see if they would be available on that day.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could do that now because clearly it's unknown, but after the 9th, as a practicality, each one will know, unless it's a tie or a one vote.
That's never happened, has it, Brady?
It has happened, and if it's very close, there could be a recount. There can be automatic recounts or discretionary.
I was joking, but thank you for clarifying.
I still have the dice I used last time.
The weighted dice, is that what you said?
I'm sorry, it's not a dice. They were colored die.
Right. Yes.
Oh, I thought it was Scrabble, like a Scrabble, or yeah, wasn't it Scrabble chips or something?
That was my idea, but we went with the colored cubes.
Oh.
And I carried around those Scrabble chips in my bag for years.
To this day. Okay. So we'll know potentially the evening of the 9th. But we're asking Administrator Yorkie to reach out to both candidates with our intentions or hopes for the 11th. Hopefully by the 26th of January, the 4 commissioners here will know for certain what our availability is on the 11th. And I understand this is not a regular meeting, it's a special meeting, and so scheduling is a lot trickier here. But I just was, really hoping to get the commissioner sat earlier. There really is no decision being made until the 23rd of February anyways, so practically it may not matter. It's just kind of the principle of it. So does that all sound fine? Okay. Thank you very much. moving on in our agenda, meetings to note, I think we talked about the Joint Powers session in Grand Portage a little bit. We also talked about the AMC training, which is wonderful. I'm curious, you know, one of the things I really I gained a lot by meeting all of the commissioners from around the state, and so the virtual format, I'm sorry to say, is we're not going to have that kind of connection. It's hard to get more perspective in the virtual formats, but we got to do that, and hopefully we'll still get that information. That's very helpful as well. But there is many benefits I've found from these trainings, and would highly recommend all of the AMC trainings that you can feasibly go to, because they do have a lot of perspective, a lot of history and best practices, and frankly, AMC has a lot of say when we're trying to work with state legislatures as well. It's just a really solid organization. Correspondence, the EDA board packet was included there, and then otherwise we're down to the recognition of staff and anniversaries. First off, we have a new hire that we approved today, Anthony Booth, PHHS social worker. Congratulations, welcome to the team. Very happy to have this position filled, and really look forward to the work that you'll be doing supporting our community. And then on to our anniversaries. The first on the list is Nanette Ahrens at the Highway Department, 10 years. We also have Michaela Klingeman, Soil and Water, 4 years. Leah Ekstrom, attorney, 6 years. Jamie Green, sheriff, 3 years. Andrew Hayes, sheriff, 3 years. Kyler Johnson, Recycle Center, 1 year. Martina Johnson, PHHS, 14 years. Holly Schroeder, recorder, 22 years. Brian Sanson, maintenance, 21 years. Brody Smith, the Recycling Center, 3 years. Mitch Travis, Land Services, 4 years. April Zimmer, administration, 2 years. Thank you, April. And K9 Eddie in the Sheriff's Department has been with us for 3 years. So thank you all very much for your service here with the county. We literally could not do it without you, and it's wonderful to have you as a part of the team. Without anything else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you, Commissioner Starley. Do we have support?
Sullivan supports.
Thank you, Commissioner Sullivan. I see Commissioner Hawkins had mute on, otherwise anyways, roll call vote. Commissioner Hawkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Starley.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills is aye as well for unanimous approval to adjourn. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.